Why are some garages thriving while others are quietly shutting their doors? Is it luck, location, or is it something deeper? Something to do with growth and decay. Today, we're diving into the truth about growth, scaling, and decay in the UK independent garage sector. By the end of this episode, you'll know whether your business is actually growing or quietly shrinking, even if the numbers on the top line look bigger. Hello and welcome. My name is Andy Crook, and I'm your host for this training topic, all about growing pains. My mission is to help garage owners become more successful in business. I do that by going live most weeks and talking about one of the 5 pillars of business as I see it. That's planning, finance, people and performance, systems, and marketing. This week, we're in the planning pillar, and our focus is on a subject that every garage should care about: growth. So let's start the reality check. According to IBIS World, the UK motor vehicle maintenance and repair sector has around about 42,978 businesses. On paper, it looks huge. But here's the kicker. Growth across the sector has been just 0.3% per year over the last 5 years. That's between 2020 and 2025. Basically, that's standing still. And in business, standing still is the same as going backwards. So these figures point to a mature, saturated, yet competitive domain with tight margins, meaning that it's difficult to achieve growth in this sector. But meanwhile, there is demand, because as of the latest figures, up to August 2024, the traffic in Britain was at 103% of pre-COVID levels. And we all know that the car park is aging, and older cars mean more wear, more breakdowns, and therefore more repair work. So the opportunity to grow is out there. The question is, are you capturing the demand? And are you simply getting bigger and not better? So before we move on, let's find out, what do we really mean by growth? So growth, for the purposes of today, is a year-on-year increase in either turnover, staff, customers, or capacity. Typically, when people talk about growth, they really talk about an increase in turnover. But it doesn't just have to be turnover. You can measure growth as an increase in the number of staff, or the number of customers you serve, or your ability to do the work. Capacity. The thing is with growth, it tends to be linear. If you double your inputs, you roughly double your outputs. More MOT slots filled, more car services, more invoices get written. But here's the trouble. If your growth is lower than your business inflation rate, you're actually decaying. And business inflation isn't the same as the retail price index figure that you see on the news. It's the real world cost of doing business. So you've got to look at your energy bills, your wages, your rent, your rates, taxes, and more recently, national insurance, as well as parts and consumables. If those costs rise at 4% a year, but your turnover only rises at the industry sector average of 0.3%, you're actually falling behind. And the other problem with growth is that growth doesn't come on its own. Normally, to do more of something, you incur more costs in doing that. And that's where the difference between growth and scaling comes in. Because what's scaling? Isn't scale growth? Scaling is different. Scaling is usually defined as achieving 20% or more growth year on year, 3 years in a row. So 20% more turnover, or 20% more staff, or you service 20% more customers, or you have 20% more capacity year on year for a minimum of 3 years in a row. It's a big ask. And that's why fewer than 1% of small to medium enterprises ever manage it. But those who do generate a staggering 55% of the UK's turnover. Scaling unlike growth, is non-linear, because by improving systems, processes, automation, and leverage, you can get 3, 4, or even 5 times the output for the same input. Think of it a bit like this. Growth is like pressing harder on the accelerator, where scaling is turbocharging the engine. So when you ask yourself, do I need to be bigger or better? The real answer is both. So while less than 300 garages in the UK achieve scale, learning how to improve systems, processes, automation, and leverage unlocks that non-linear growth. So this is where the Atomic Success MBA framework kicks in. You probably all know by now that MBA in this case stands for more, better, before additional. It's a simple do more of what you already do, make it better before chasing something new framework. The something new is the additional. So let's try and bring that to life with an example such as MOTs. If you've got MOT slots going unsold, you don't need more reps or more staff. You need more customers. And that might mean improving your reminder system or running a small local campaign or improving your front of house team's conversion rate. But here's the catch. Doing more MOTs creates pressure. More calls, more admin, more repairs, because there's more failures. If your systems and processes aren't tight, you'll just move the bottleneck somewhere else in the business. And that's why we need to think more like a business that is in scale by doing more, but doing it better. Let's run some numbers to try and make what I just said make sense. So if you've got a garage business with a £400,000 turnover, with a 10% margin, you're making £40,000 a year profit. If that turnover grows by the sector average of 0.3% a year, in 5 years' time, turnover will be 406,000. But if costs continue to inflate as they are, and we'll use a modest 4%, in 5 years' time, your costs will have increased by 22% in that same period. Suddenly, your profit isn't 40k, it's a £32,000 loss. On paper, turnover went up. You got bigger. In reality, the business decayed. To simply stay still, you need to grow by at least 4% year on year. That means taking turnover from 400k to 487k in those same 5 years. And that's just to stand still. So when I say no growth is decay, they ain't empty words. And that's exactly why a garage that's currently turned over £400,000 with a 10% margin could end up in the red within 5 years if they only grow at the sector average, which is 0.3%. So let's talk a little bit about small to medium-sized enterprises. And let's zoom a little bit out and let's look at the UK business landscape as a whole, because there are around about 5.5 million SMEs in the UK. And SMEs make up 99% of all businesses. They employ around about 16.6 million people and they generate 2.8 trillion in turnover. The small business community is the very heart of Britain's economy. But only around about 34,000 businesses in scale-up exist. Yet they generate 1.4 trillion of that 2.8 turnover. So less than 1% of the businesses produce more than half of the value. And that's the power of scaling. To achieve that, it's 20% growth year on year for a minimum of 3 years. It's a huge ask. And most businesses can't do it. In fact, only, less than 1% of businesses in the UK are in scaling. But that shouldn't put us off at looking at how these scaling businesses work, because they don't just get bigger, they get better. And that's the real lesson here. It's not about being bigger, it's about being better. And we'll grow by doing that. Because doing more usually means more turnover, but it almost always means more costs too. And that's the problem, because when we do more of something, we incur more cost. So we work harder, but not smarter. And doing better means you have to improve efficiency. You have to reduce wasted time. You have to have tighter processes. You have to make fewer mistakes. You have to have happier customers. Doing more better is where the real magic happens. That's where non-linear growth happens. So imagine tightening your workshop planning so you lose half as much of the ramp time you currently do. Imagine the front of house converting 10% more inquiries into bookings. Imagine fewer reworks because of better communication between technicians and service advisors. None of those things require extra staff, more ramps, or even any capital investment. But they do free up capacity, and that capacity can be turned into profit. I recently spoke with a garage owner who'd grown his turnover by 10% over the last year. He was really impressed until we dug deeper into the numbers, where we discovered that parts inflation was up 16%, wages were up 5%, and his energy bill had increased by nearly 8%. His costs were growing faster than he could increase his turnover. Yes, he was working hard. Yes, he had more stress, but he was actually making less profit than the year before, despite the fact his turnover had increased. And that's not growth. That's decay in disguise. So let me ask you this. Are you tracking your true business inflation rate? Do you know if you're actually growing or decaying? Remember, just because turnover has increased doesn't mean that you're actually growing. You could be quietly decaying. And then ask yourself, where in your garage could you do more, better? Because growth is exciting, but growth on its own can be a trap. Unless you're growing it above the inflation rate, you are, in fact, decaying. So you need to take a leaf out of those businesses that achieve scaling. They're not just doing more, but they're doing more better. And that's where the transformation can happen. So you have my atomic challenge this week. Calculate your real business inflation rate. Check if your turnover growth percentage is above it. Then identify one system or process that could improve in the next 30 days to create more capacity without adding cost. And remember this, doing more creates cash flow. Doing it better generates profit. Doing more better creates non-linear growth. The choice is simple, grow or decay. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you should, you must, and what's stopping you is probably starting. Thanks for listening.